If you yourself are triggered by anything, we have monitors at the back. You can tap those monitors and they will direct you to the 3 people who we have here today that will help you. We also have the Interagency Committee for Children and Families booth outside at the back if you want more information on that organization. But today we're going to have a different type of speakers panel. We're going to ask the speakers the panel a question. They're going to have 15 minutes to discuss it amongst themselves. And then we're going to throw that to the room, that same question. Because as much as we do have doctors and experts in their field, you are on the ground, you yourself have lived experiences, and we want to give an opportunity to have dialogue amongst those who are in the room. The team at the Family Center did an incredible job of inviting those who we felt could really contribute to this conversation into the room. So if all of you at this point, you remember the scuba diver, this is the point where you're going to dive deep or snorkel or put your toes in the water, but we want you all off the beach and at least in the waters. So if the first question to the panel, that was, why is the ACEs lens the most meaningful lens for our community?
So
who goes first?
we talk to each other?
You rock, paper, scissors it.
Okay. Well, I think it's the most meaningful lens for any community, not just your community. I do a lot of work in the Caribbean island of Grenada, where we work with the abused, maltreated children, and we've been trying to establish an ACEs perspective and lens there, because when we started working there, the caregivers in the residential homes who were supposed to help the children and provide relationships of healing and growth, we got feedback from them of well, these children were born bad. They're possessed by the devil. And you really need to change that. You really need to show that, and even in the US, that it's a developmental process that transforms the child's developing systems, and how the interactions and relationships really change things. And as a physician, I think the medical model of just treating the symptoms, of just treating what falls into certain criteria, of having algorithmic stances, just looking at the child and then the adolescent and then the adult in a vacuum without taking into account relationships and how relationships form and modify and shape and sculpt the developing whole person in context of where they are is wrong. We talk about ADHD. ADHD is a made-up diagnosis in one sense, okay? That the child is reacting on a certain level to what's going on around them that's been shaped by past experiences, which is not to say that you may not have 1 or 2 children with no other causative factors that you can identify that may benefit from a little bit of medication, but I think that's the minority and not the majority. And looking at the child by itself without taking into account that this child might have come to school without breakfast, or watching their parents argue, or having been traumatized physically or sexually abused themselves, and expect them to learn at the rate of every other child and not to zone out or not to be hostile. It's inconceivable after a while. And that's why the developmental lens of childhood experiences, adverse and engaging, we fail to recognize that we start off neutral in one sense. And like that slide I had, the brain and the systems wire and connect according to what they're exposed to. So to have an ACEs developmental lens where you can identify somebody who comes into your practice, your school, your church, your business, as an employee or whatever, who's acting a little bit out of the ordinary, and try to think about, well, maybe he's been divorced twice, maybe he's lost 3 jobs, maybe he's got hypertension, asthma, eczema, any inflammatory heart disease, and that's your cue that you should start to think maybe he's had some adversity that he doesn't want to or she doesn't want to, express, but I should treat them and gradually it might come out, because the best way to heal, as everybody has spoken about, is through relationships. So that's why I think having an ACEs lens in addition to other lenses is very important.
Thank you, Dr. Honigman. Can we hear from Dr. Awasan or Samadam?
I can go. So thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking about the question, why is ACEs the most meaningful lens for our community? I'm not sure if I'll say it's the most meaningful lens. I'll say it's a meaningful lens, right? It's one part of a lens that we can use to really help our community, particularly when we're talking about adverse childhood experiences. I think as a relational therapist, I also call myself that in connection to a marriage and family therapist, is really looking at the ways in which not only adverse childhood experiences in terms of the trauma that kids are experiencing, the trauma that their family are experiencing, much of like what we talked about is also looking at the generational aspects of it. And I'm very, very big on really focusing on racial trauma. And the reason why I'm focused on it, I feel like it's because, to be selfish, and also because it's also my own trauma, right? As an African person whose ancestors and people were enslaved and stolen and colonized, right? It's very much deep within me. And when I think about all the health issues, right, that we have as Black people, it makes sense to me that we're still carrying this trauma in our body. So I don't even think you said we all sat neutral. Like, I'm not sure for people of color.
In that sense, but the fetus is exposed in utero to certain things, but it still comes out, in a sense as neutral without external, rather than intrafamilial, intergenerational, or transgenerational effects. So what you have to start with is constantly shaped, molded, and sculpted by interactions.
Right.
So in that sense, it starts off within the realm of, if not neutral, but as unaffected as you could get.
And I mean, I feel like for a lot of children of color, like they are affected by it. Even when we think about the mom, just really the stress of carrying a child, and then the stress of just trauma in itself, and then racial trauma that you haven't named or put words into, it does affect that child. And then when we talk about relational aspect of it in terms of the parents molding the child, right? What you don't know, you can pass on to your child.
Well, that's why also
I'd like to say
step.
That's possible.
Okay, just the next step in ACEs awareness and ACEs treatment and trauma-informed care, I guess, is to catch the mother prenatally and work with them that way.
I'd like to say I disagree that we come in neutral. I think as a soul, we enter neutrally, but we are born into a particular energetic field that is our family system.
Okay.
And the way I work with it in constellation work is that we embody that electromagnetic field that is the blueprint into which you are born. The moment you're born into it, and probably in utero, I don't know, but I know that we take on particular roles, particular behaviors, particular understandings purely by the fact of what system we're born into. And that system is our family, and then the largest system is our culture. And so what I do when I work with people, I don't work with children. I actually work with parents. And many parents come because of their children. So I look, okay, here's this behavior in your child. As long as the child is below 7 years old, the family can work for the child, because the child simply acts out the energetic patterns in the family system. I don't even work with the child. I think we're totally on the wrong track when we think we got to change the child. That is just not where it's at. Something happened. Thank you. Something happened in that family system, and my work is to be sort of like Sherlock Holmes. What is it? Where are we getting this energy from? Why is this kid so aggressive? Where is that violence coming from in this family system? Or why is that child so timid? Where is the fear in this family system? And we start hunting for where is it coming from. And we need to resolve the issue where it originates, because any repeat is just a symptom. And that can be a physical symptom, it can be an emotional symptom. Any repeat isn't in our time. What we see this child act out, nothing to do with now. They may be hurting someone, not because they hate this person, but because something's triggered, something is entangled in something in the past. And that's what I think is most important to work with.
Yeah.
All right, Tiffany, are we done with this ACE thing?
That's a good point.
Hi.
Oh,
Sorry.
there she is.
What was the question?
Are we done with this
What
question?
is the next question?
If you're done with the question, that question, we're going to throw it out to the room. So you had 15 minutes to gracefully argue in public. And
I
I'm
just think that
messing.
the term neutral might have been
And then,
No.
and now we're going to turn.
We all have our own essential temperament that we're born with,
Yeah.
okay? But in that sense, that temperament has not been affected externally at birth. And that temperament that we're born with, maybe that's how I should have phrased it rather, but that temperament then gets shaped and molded and changed through every interaction that we have, and we go through certain,
Not here.
basic interactions with others, that like, Bronfenbrenner's, social ecological model shows. So the first people are the intimate ones of the family that shape and sculpt and mold the basic temperament that we're born with, either for better to engage or to disengage, and then we go into school and others and this and that. So I guess what I meant, or should have stated a little bit more clearly, instead of using neutral, was that it's just not affected externally. It comes out, and that's our basic temperament. Everybody has different temperaments, and that is shaped by, who we are and how we've been through generations of epigenetic changes and, other things that get internalized and transmitted. And there's a lot of interesting research and literature on this.
Thank you.
Well, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Dr. Honigman.
Okay, sorry.
Totally.
We're
Can I
gonna
respond back to him real
we're
quick?
gonna turn this question back over to the room. So here's some ground rules for your dialogue. You're gonna contribute your thinking, listen to understand, connect ideas, and encourage. So I am not an extroverted person despite this role. And I know that some of you are introverts, but I would encourage you to be in dialogue with one another and not take so much of the time for the group to talk. So if you look, you should be in groups of 6. We have some in groups of 7 or 8 or 4. At this point, you're just going to be in conversation yourselves. And if you know that you talk a lot, maybe wait for somebody else to initiate the conversation. So amongst yourselves, you just heard from our experts as local experts and lived, if you're here, you had a childhood. Why is the ACEs lens the most meaningful framework we could use just based on what you've heard today? You got 15 minutes.